Production support for Hot and Cold is brought to you by American Solar Technics, manufacturers of components for wood burning and solar heating systems.
Hey, I'm Tom Gozy. Welcome to Hot and Cold. Got a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff done, but I got a really big problem. The roof bandits were here. I got to go call the police. Well, we got a lot of stuff done. We are ready, we are waiting for the spray foam guys to come, and everything I've done has been in preparation of that. First thing we've done, we're in the front of the house on the staging. I have put OSB on the wall here. You probably don't recall, but we had foam up to about this point. So I put OSB on, and then I just put studs to the top of the foam up, and I plumbed the wall. So this is nice and flat, because when I did that gable end, I had a lot of difficulty. And you can't see it on the camera, but it is not, there's a wave or two. I didn't want to deal with that again, especially on the front of the building, so I plumbed everything out, 16 inches on center, so she's fairly solid, and tied it all together. And what they're going to do is spray in here. We'll put a little bit of loose foam in, spray around it, make this extremely solid. So this is done and ready to go. I do need to vacuum it out to get the stray insulation out. Of course, the big story of the day is I removed the roof. And I've been hunting for a crew to do this for me because I'm getting old and decrepit. But you know, it really went fast. I did all this roof in about a day by myself with nobody on the ground. And I never invoked the Lord's name in vain. It really went very smoothly because the boards came right off with shingles on them. The shingles were brittle enough that we could just pop them off. All the insulation that was in there came out. The other good thing about this is the lath for the plaster is 1x boards, so it's much easier to walk on this and not do any damage to what's underneath. Of course, the roof framing is a little thin, and you can see that we've got flattened out spruce and birch trees up there. And what can I say? They're 4 feet on center. We are going to have to beef this up a bit. We're also going to lay foam in here and spray around the edges, so we'll make it very strong and structural in the process. So the plan is to go horizontally every 2 feet with 2x4 strapping, and then we'll put some collar ties in up above, and we'll see how solid that feels. And we'll spray in right to the surface of the 2x4s that are on the top. So it'll be very solid. So this will all be one big mass where foam is adhered to everything and is holding everything together very snugly. A couple of good things about that is A, it'll be really tight, B, it'll be really well insulated, but most importantly, it'll be extremely structural, and that has been somewhat wanting in this old house. It will not be inexpensive to spray foam, but this is a circumstance where spray foam makes a tremendous amount of sense, and we will be showing that to you probably on the next show, the installation of the spray foam. And it's very fast and relatively easy. There's been a lot of prep work here, a couple of weeks of getting ready in my time frame, which means I have to work in between doing things, but we got pretty far along. There was vermiculite in the slopey areas. Fortunately, it was non-asbestos based. Some vermiculite has asbestos in it. This stuff did not, so that made it a lot easier. On the flat area on the roof, I was able to walk across and had a place to stand, so that was good. There was fiberglass up there, and you'll see some of the fiberglass in a minute. All that is going bye-bye. We will vacuum out all the remaining vermiculite and get this as clean as possible before the crew comes. And of course we have to cut and fit foam anyway, so we'll get that put in there. So we're making progress. We've got this done. We've got more to show you on the back. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take a really quick break, go out back and look at what we did back there, because there's more that, you know, the building was leaning. You remember that? And we did the first floor walls and they were straight and true and everything was great. But the second floor was kind of going like this. So this corrected on this side, but the back was a whole other thing. Stay with us, you got to see it. We'll be right back. Around back here, we still have a bit of a mess. I had my friend Paul here this morning with a big truck to help me clean up the debris from the roof. And we still have insulation kicking around, but we had 15, 18-foot long boards with shingles stuck on them. And we got that out of here. This I can put in my pickup and take myself. If this was airing right away, I would give you that fiberglass, but you're going to see it several months after when the new season starts. So I want to show you on the back what kind of mischief I got into. And I guess the best way to do it is for us to get up on the staging again and take a peek, because you can't get the full impression of what happened from down here. Well, we're on the back staging now, the back of the house, and we had a little bit different circumstance here. This wall from here up was leaning out. It was leaning out far enough that it really scared me when I discovered it. So and again, I wanted to get the same kind of thing where we had something solid to put our sheathing on that was going to be relatively plumb. So I came down. We have foam just sticking up a little bit beyond the OSB here, and I brought 2x to the top of the foam so we can put a full sheet of OSB on this after this is spray filled. This 2x is screwed to this 2x, which is the stud for the first floor wall. And then we have that first ring beam that sits on the wall, and I notched in, or I mortised in, all these studs, so we have the full thickness of the 2x4 going straight up by, and we've toe screwed in on both sides to lock this 2x4 to this beam, so this beam will not roll anymore. The front and back beam for the second floor has tipped in a bit, and you can sort of see the angle here against the plumb 2x4. So we don't want that to move, and it probably hasn't moved in a zillion years, but we want to make sure it does not. So that's locked in. We spread it out over all these 2x4s every 16 inches for the same reason, to distribute the load out, so 1 or 2 or 10 even might not have held this in place, this big beam, but the ones, there's 22 here I think, 24, will hold it in place very solidly. So most of the studs have come up in right underneath this beam here, which we get up in the sun to have to look at it. This is the base for the roof, and the rafters come down to it, are nailed in place. And there's a little bit of wave in this as well, so we've adjusted for that accordingly. And what we're going to do to make all this solid, we screwed it together so it is solid, but when we spray foam in here, it'll lock everything together. We'll put the sheathing on, that'll lock it even more. The scary part for me was when we took the sheathing boards off, which were from here up, and I saw how much this was leaning out, and you can see here exactly how much it's leaning out. I was nervous about taking the sheathing off because I felt that was holding a good part of the building together. Putting these in has made it more solid than it was. We sprayed the foam in, it will be even more solid, and of course it will be much more structural, and of course very highly insulated. This wall here should be plaster and lath like we have right over here, but this is right adjacent to the stairs, and you probably don't remember, but the wall because this whole thing was leaning out. That inside wall, this was the part that was leaning out the most. This inside wall was like that. So I decided that we would cut it out. It turned out to be almost exactly 4 feet by 8 feet. We cut it out, put in new studs, and I put 1/2-inch CDX plywood in place, which allowed us to have something very solid there, again, adding a little bit more to the structure, or in the structural integrity of this area. We didn't need to do that. We could have put a piece of sheetrock up, but at this point, a little bit more money to put plywood up, and I think it really is worth the investment. And we can skim coat it out later on with joint compound and look just like sheetrock. It'll just mate right up to the sheetrock, so you'll never know the difference. All the weird holes and stuff and voids and gaps and panels will all get bonded together again with spray foam. And you'll see that next week when the spray foam guys are here. It's going to be a fun project. And it's probably the most expensive way to insulate a structure, but when you factor in the structural stability it will give us, and for me, especially right now, it will push the whole project ahead way fast. So we'll trade off the lack of being able to find people to work on the project as autumn is upon us, by the fact that, boom, this wall, front wall will be done, the roof will be done. All we have to do is put sheathing on it and we can start putting up trim. That is worth a lot of money. So that will be a very nice thing to see when we get to that point. Anything else I want to, oh, the other thing, of course, is, again, this is a structural problem we have here. Screws make all the difference in the world. I was even tempted to glue it. Gluing and screwing is going to be as strong as it gets. Screws by themselves are fairly strong. We are going to sort of glue and screw when we put the spray foam on. But if I wasn't using spray foam, I would have seriously entertained the notion of using construction adhesive in each one of these joints to try to hold everything really solid. Because again, we're worried about an area this high, which is carrying the major load of the building, which is the roof, rolling off the building. So we don't want to have this kind, we want to be able to carry this load to the rest of the structure and make it very solid. So this does make a big difference. The chipmunks are laughing at me, so I'm getting distracted. Let's take care of a little bit of business here, and we'll come right back and see what other structural things we have to deal with. Well, this is the last domain here of stuff we need to get prepped. I'm not sure we're going to get it ready in time for the spray foam guys, do the whole thing. But I've got this area open, and you remember we had this rotted ring beam here. It's still here, it's still rotted, and we're going to have to deal with this fairly soon. Now, in pulling things apart, it's obvious we've got new sheathing boards up here, we've got new framing here. This whole wall was rotted. So somebody came in here, I would say in the past 10 years, left this alone. I don't think this is rotted in that time, and just reconstructed this wall, which I would imagine was extremely floppy. The plaster and the support for the plaster behind it was okay. So I suspect what happened was we had a roof leak, and we had water leak down through, or it might have been a leak around a window, but we had rot in here, and of course it still is evident here. So what do we do to fix the problem? Well, this is a non-structural wall. It's the gable end wall. We don't have it carrying a lot of load. We basically have it supporting this wall. None of the roof load transmits down through this wall for the most part. So we don't have to be as critical about this as we would be around the front of the back. So I think what we're going to do, I've talked to some folks at the university, we're going to strip out as much of this rotted wood as possible. We're going to sister to it, and we're going to spray it with borates so it will not rot anymore. If it did have the opportunity to rot or have critters in it, and it's evident we had a lot of carpenter ant activity. Oh, and by the way, when I was taking out the cellulose here, I found in this bay fiberglass, and it was full of dead carpenter ants. So I suspect when they built this, they sprayed it with some nuclear medicine to kill the carpenter ants that still might have been around. And they all kind of came to it and died, which was kind of nice. So there's no activity here. I think where we're going to be today, we're taping on a Sunday. The foam guys are coming to spray this coming Friday, and knowing what I have to do by way of just cleaning up and getting ready, we'll strip out a couple of pieces of sheathing here, get up to this, just to this level. I got to put some wiring in here, and we'll get this prepped, and we'll just spray up to here, and then maybe I'll just cut and fit for the little bit we'll need around the windows. So we're going to get all the spray foam done on one day. I thought it was going to be 2 days originally, so I think we're going to do well. This framing is fine. One thing I'm finding that's very striking, any nail that is not galvanized is rusting. And last night, when I stripped the roof yesterday, and I left my pry bars up there because I knew I had a little bit more to do this morning before we got rid of all the debris. And my pry bar is covered with rust because of all the humidity and the salt air coming in. So it's an interesting tale that we tell here, or we see, in terms of the kind of fasteners you use in what is a coastal environment. I've been using anodized screws for everything, or coated screws for everything, and I think that's a very good path to have chosen, and obviously we'll continue to do it. The other thing that I want to point out, and I can't, well, you can see it here a little bit. We've been using new pressure-treated lumber. They call it ACQ. The original pressure-treated lumber was called CCA, chromated copper arsenate. That's being phased out by the end of 2003. The ACQ will take its place. There's a lot of literature that's telling us that ACQ corrodes fasteners, which is a little bit scary. So the thing you need to do if you're doing a lot of construction is make sure you have a coated fastener, a hot dip galvanized fastener, or better yet, a stainless steel fastener, which ain't going to be cheap. Whenever you're building something like a deck, especially a deck, something that's outside exposed to the weather, where there could be a lot of water mixing with the pressure-treated lumber, I think it makes imminent sense that you have stainless steel fasteners. And I guess we'll be very careful in what we put in here as well. We will be using probably the older type pressure-treated lumber just because that's what I happen to have sitting around here. And we'll be taking a shop vac and removing all this cellulose. I've been noting while we've been taping here, there's a hole in here. I have found burrows in all the insulation, in the fiberglass and the cellulose, for critters, which makes me extremely uncomfortable about fluffy insulation. And I'll tell you what, as a matter of fact, let's go back and take a look at the fiberglass. I want to show you the holes. It's never would have expected it. Well, we're in the field here where all the fiberglass is settled as I've tossed it off the roof. And I was seeing a lot of this in the fiberglass. Obviously, they're burrow holes that go down through, and they come out in different areas on the fiberglass. And I'm amazed that critters have that kind of tolerance. I know how you and I feel about messing around with fiberglass, but apparently critters don't seem to mind it too much. And here was evidence of a nest that was inside. There was a lot of cellulose mixed in here as well. And it's interesting as I've gone through in the attic and picked pieces up that I found that level of activity, because that's not something I would have anticipated. Now I know there was a lot of there was a lot of mouse activity in this house. If you remember last season, all the droppings we found everywhere. Well, the droppings are pretty much taken out as we've removed so much of the structure. But the things we found that are still here are nests made up of shredded fiberglass. We found burrows in all the cellulose in the walls. And of course in the fiberglass, every time I picked up a piece, I've seen, especially if it's not been disturbed by me, I can see burrows, you know, going in and out and around. So it's kind of striking. Now that was partly due to the fact that the house was riddled with holes. It had a lot of entry points for mice and maybe rats and God knows what else to get into, because at some point this whole back wall here, I think, if I can be a architectural anthropologist, had fallen away, and it was probably pretty well open to the yard. I've seen a lot of mice out in the field. There's fields around here, and it's a pretty rural area, so there's probably a lot of critter activity in the walls, and they were looking for places to nest, and if they could stand the itchiness, which apparently they could, you know, it was a great place to nest. So we'll be rid of this. We've got walls now that are solid foam. There's no voids in them. And of course up there we'll be spraying foam, so there won't be any voids in that, and that's going to follow right through to the roof. It was a telling tale to me that I found a box of decon in the attic. And this is an attic, this is not like a finished or a storage type attic, it's an attic with that much headroom. So they put decon up there for a reason, and the reason was they probably heard the mice skittering back and forth. And we know they were in the kitchen, we know they were in the interior walls, and we know that that was a major problem at some point in the past. So all we have to do now is clean up the mess. We got all the big stuff out of here, gone up to the landfill in Hamden, and just so you know, it used to be the landfill was open to the public for demolition debris the first Saturday and the third Sunday of every month. It is now open, as the insulation blows in my face, every Saturday and Sunday to the public. So that's tremendously simpler to get rid of stuff like this. And what I got to do now is get this loaded in the truck, because it's getting late enough in the afternoon, they're going to close soon. So it's all, the good news is fiberglass and cellulose are pretty light. We mix it with some shingles and we have a great load to go to the dump with. And the only problem I have is that there's always this good stuff that should come out with me. But I'm afraid that if I do that, I'm going to be leaving with more weight than I came in with, and they don't like that. So I think we're just about out of time. Next week, if you ever miss a show on Hot and Cold, you know how disappointing it is. Next week, you don't want to miss it, because we're going to have people here with spray foam apparatus spraying in, probably by my guess, 5,000 to 6,000 board feet of foam. That's a lot of insulation. You don't want to miss it, because we're going to turn this from a sow's ear into a silk purse and make it weather tight, make it stronger, and I don't have to do a thing. All I have to do is talk and watch. It's a great country. We'll see you next week. Be sure to listen to us on the radio. If you have any questions, give us a call. You'll see we're at the end of the show. Have a great week and keep warm.
Production support for Hot and Cold is brought to you by American Solar Technics, manufacturers of components for wood burning and solar heating systems.